Welcome to the Abe Legal Podcast. This is Talib Kareem of Abe Legal. I am excited to have a very special guest, the co-founder of a law firm, which is, as I understand, New York's largest, and everything has to be large in New York, but New York's largest Muslim-owned law firm. And that's none other than the esteemed counsel there in New York, Tarik Davis. But before I bring on Tarik, let me tell you a little bit about Abe Legal. We are a platform that is helping make the practice of law easier, more enjoyable, and hopefully more profitable for small and solo law firm practitioners. If you have a law firm and you're looking for an opportunity to market yourself and increase your brand recognition, put our software, particularly our search engine optimization technology, as well as scheduling technology, to work for you by going to Abe Legal, and let's set up a time to talk with you about what we can do. And if you are a person looking for legal help, particularly legal help from people who are going to be responsive and are going to be seasoned, not some rookie out of law school, but somebody who you can get the job done with, then contact Abe Legal. We are not a pro bono or free legal service provider. What we are fixers, people who can take care of business and get the job done for you, your family, your business, your nonprofit, or maybe even someone else who is in need of legal services that comes to you seeking a resource. That's abe.legal, L-E-G-A-L, no .com, but .legal. So without any further ado, we're going to put that website in the chat for you to check out throughout the conversation. But without any further ado, I'm going to come back and introduce to you again one of New York's top lawyers and co-founder of one of the largest Muslim-owned law firms. So stand by. Coming back to you. I'm back. Talib Kareem, as I mentioned before, with Abe Legal, and we are just really excited about the conversation that we have today with Tarik Davis. Tarik, first of all, assalamu alaikum to you. As you can see, I have my nice Ramadan background, although Ramadan has passed.
Yes, it has.
But some of us are still celebrating Ramadan and enjoying the 6 days of Shawwal, where we're able to, basically get the blessings, as they say, of fasting for the entire year if we fast 6 days during the month after Ramadan. So this is our post-Ramadan podcast, and we're very grateful, and quite frankly, we're really looking forward to next Ramadan, quite honestly.
Always.
I pray that you and your family had an enjoyable Ramadan, and that Allah, accepts all of your sacrifices, because that's what it's all about. It's not, some people, think about like the, non-Muslim holidays and traditions like Christmas, for example, which it gets commercialized, if you will, but our celebration is truly about sacrifice. And I'm grateful for the sacrifices that we were able to make. And I just hope that the Almighty accepts them. And likewise, how was your Ramadan? And how was your family's Ramadan, Brother Tarik?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Assalamu alaikum again. Listen, Ramadan is always wonderful. Ramadan is always special. So it's wonderful to have it come. It's sad to see it leave, but we look forward, inshallah, to next year.
And I'm going to get into, really getting the scoop about who Tarik Davis is. But my first question is, how is it practicing, Ramadan as a lawyer? A lot of people are fascinated about, lawyers in general, about, them taking calls from clients, them going to court, them, preparing, briefs, and all the work. A lot of people associate practicing law with late hours. So layer that on with, being a Muslim, one, and then practicing, your business, or operating your business, your legal practice during the month of Ramadan, where you're also fasting, abstaining for drinking and eating, and doing a lot of extra prayers. What was the challenge like for you this Ramadan in particular as a Muslim lawyer?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I started practicing Islam, very blessed. I started practicing Islam really pretty much right out of law school. So, I have, throughout my legal career, I've always fasted during Ramadan. And I've actually found that Ramadan sometimes can be the most busy time. I tend to have a lot of trials during Ramadan. Look, I think that being a lawyer, you can lose perspective very easily. People believe that lawyers have, occupy a certain special position, that they have a certain amount of intelligence, that there's something unique and special about being a lawyer, and lawyers, buy into that very often, and it leads to lack of humility very often. And the beautiful thing about Ramadan is because we're called upon to really submit ourselves, especially during that month, to God, more so than throughout the year. I mean, Islam calls us to submit ourselves always, but I find that it's something that definitely it kind of lets you know your place. That here you are spending the month fasting. I don't feel that fasting is any more difficult during Ramadan. Practicing law is any more difficult during Ramadan because you're fasting. I think it definitely it kind of leads you to increase your humility to understand that practicing law is just a job. It's a job, and it's really a trust. It's a really. I remember speaking to some law students recently and saying that, Muslim law students, that you've been given a position that is unique, not just because people see it as something special and you can make a lot of money, but there's a lot of good you can do. So, to me, Ramadan and how I try to practice law, it fits perfectly.
Now, I appreciate you giving us a little bit about yourself in that. You mentioned how you began practicing Islam right as you began practicing law. And that's really, I think, a very unique historical fact that not many people began in the journey as a Muslim as they would begin their journey as a lawyer. Let's dig a little bit deeper in that and kind of get a little bit of background on who you are, where you came from, and what led you both to the practice of Islam as well as the practice of law.
I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, with a mother who insisted upon education. She made me start first grade at age of 2.5. And I went to school pretty much from that age, from 2.5 up until I graduated law school at the age of 27, and nonstop. Education was the biggest, huge focus for my mother. My brother, I'm the oldest of 3 children, born and raised in Brooklyn. All of us went to school and received college degrees because my mother pushed us so much. Sometimes that was not easy to experience growing up, but when I think back on it, my mother knew exactly what she was doing. And what led me to Islam, I mean, growing up, there was a Quran in the house. I just see my mother reading Quran, and we didn't really, we kind of identified as Muslim, but really we didn't, it wasn't really enforced in the house so much. So I kind of grew up around the Quran, but not really hearing much about Islam. And as I grew up after law school, certain things happen in your life, good and bad, which may lead you to certain things that led me to read the Quran. And after reading the Quran, when I was right after law school, I just said, yes, this is what I need. This is what I need. And so then I really began, full on the practice of Islam. I've been practicing. Thank Allah for that ever since. So, the most important thing to me is my faith. Nothing's more important than that. And as far as, my mother's very proud of me, of having a son who's a lawyer. She's proud of my brother. She's proud of my sister. They're both professionals. And I'm glad I make her proud. But to me, what gives me the joy in being able to be a lawyer, and the only reason I went into this job in the first place, was because it gives me an opportunity to do good. It gives me an opportunity to really benefit people. And that's all I ever really wanted to do. So to the extent that I'm doing that, then, I thank Allah for that.
MashaAllah. What a beautiful story. Let me ask you then, in terms of like your journey from, graduating from law school, and you went to Brooklyn Law School, right?
Brooklyn Law School, right.
So, in terms of that experience coming out of Brooklyn Law School, accepting Islam, starting as a young lawyer, I understand you began practicing immediately in your own practice. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was stupid. Right out of law school, back then, this is 1991 when I graduated. I didn't want a corporate job, and they were paying about $85,000 back then, as I remember. I wanted to be a public servant. So I did interview with two positions. I interviewed with the district attorney's office, which I knew I wasn't going to accept. I interviewed with Legal Aid Society when I was offered both jobs. So I wasn't going to prosecute. So I didn't, nothing against prosecutors. I think that they have a tremendous amount of potential to do good, but I didn't want to do it at the time. And I didn't want to work for Legal Aid because I honestly felt they weren't paying. So I felt they weren't offering me enough. So I went into private practice. I thought that, once you get licensed and pass the bar, you can shut up shop. So I thought I could do it, which was a disaster. It turned out to be a real disaster as far as, being able to make money. I just gotten married, and I didn't know how to charge people. I didn't know, I remember sitting this is before internet and computers and Lexus and Westlaw, going to Brooklyn Law School Library and spending hours just figuring out how to do certain things, simple things. And back then, there weren't really, I only knew one other Muslim lawyer at the time, Michael Warren, who was a great civil rights attorney, criminal attorney. He was the only Muslim attorney that I knew of. And now there's so many Muslim attorneys. I'm not saying there weren't any back then, but I didn't know any.
MashaAllah. I am so happy you mentioned Brother Michael Warren's name. I remember when I had no gray hair, reaching out to him as well while he was doing work for the Center for Constitutional Rights there in New York. And as you may remember, it was right after 9/11, and we were very few, even then, 10 years after you graduated, if you will. And we found ourselves thrust. I was trained as a telecommunications lawyer, but I was thrust in the seat of, defending the civil rights of Muslims, not just where I was located, which is here in DC, in Maryland, Virginia, but around the country. Since you started going on that journey, maybe let's talk a little bit about what it was like as a Muslim lawyer, during that time, 9/11, and what you've seen since that time in the past 20 years, particularly there in New York.
Oh, there were a lot of changes. I mean, I remember I started out as a criminal defense attorney for the most part. That's what I did. And I remember, especially in the wintertime when the prayers are very close, and having to tell the judge in the middle of a trial, well, I have to go pray. and at that time, it wasn't a lot of, they knew the defendants, a lot of defendants were Muslim, and they needed to pray. Well, they were very surprised. Pray, you're a Muslim? Yeah, it was back then. It was out of the ordinary. The idea of even, saying I can't go to court because I have to be in Juma. You have to explain what's Juma. Some judges didn't know. A lot of the judges didn't. Now it's very good. It's very, the judges are knowledgeable. The people are knowledgeable about Islam. They know Muslims have to pray. They know about Ramadan. I remember telling judges, I have a trial scheduled in Ramadan, and I explained, well, I don't really want to do this trial. Could we do it after Ramadan? And there wasn't a great deal of familiarity. Now, Islam and Muslims themselves are much more people are more aware of Islam and the requirements that Muslims have. As far as the September 11th was interesting. I it didn't really affect me in my law practice. I did end up representing a couple of individuals who were accused of 9/11 related charges, some very interesting cases. But at the time, I know there was this big fear among the Muslim community about what was going on, and I saw what was going on. Obviously, I don't feel it impacted necessarily my law practice so much. I continued to do what I was doing more or less, and I didn't really fall into that, well, we are the other now kind of thing. I just continued to practice Islam as I had, and telling judges I have to pray and I have to do this and I have to do that. And telling colleagues the same thing. So it was an interesting time, 9/11. I will say that, generally speaking, for Muslims. But I don't think it impacted me in my practice so much.
Well, that's great. So tell me a little bit about how your law firm came to be the largest Muslim-owned law firm in the state of New York, the big state of New York, as they call it,
Well, that's what I say.
Does New York have the largest number of lawyers, or is it Washington, D.C.? I always wonder who's number one or two.
I never looked into that. Probably Washington would have the highest percent per capita because there's not as many people in Washington as there are in New York. I don't know. It's a good question. I'm going to Google it after we're finished. So as far as I say it's the largest run Muslim law firm in New York. There are a lot of Muslims practicing law, and there are Muslims who started their own firms. Most of them are in private practice. I think that I say we have four attorneys, four Muslim partners, and we started this firm in 2013. I remember being in law school, and this is where parents come in. I tell you, my father used to always tell us, I can still hear his words in my head, start your own, have your own business. So out of law school, I did that, and I was in private practice up to 2013. But I'd always wanted to have a group of people together. A group of friends and people who could work together. I always wanted to have something more than just me. And in 2001, I approached a brother who I knew very well, Mustafa Indanusa, and I talked to him about, well, maybe we should start this firm. And we knew he had just met a brother who had recently graduated and passed the bar, started practicing, Muhammad Salim. And I also knew Muhammad Ikhlas. And I don't remember how I met Muhammad Ikhlas, but I knew him. And Mustafa and I approached both of them, and they were interested. And we spent 2 years planning it. And in August 1st of 2013, we opened our doors, Davis, Indanusa, Ikhlas, and Salim. I don't know of a Muslim firm in New York City that has four partners, Muslim, all four totally Muslim owned, and we try to practice law that way. And there's certain things we don't do. Like, we won't go get someone a liquor license. There are things we don't do. We're very careful when it comes to the dealings with banks and the interest and everything. So it's good to have like-minded people, to be around brothers that you really love and who are like-minded. And we all have the same mindset of wanting to really do good. So that's the best part about having this firm. Yeah, but there's so many Muslim lawyers nowadays and Muslim law firms.
I think it's a unique question, actually, that I'd like to dive into, is that with so many Muslim lawyers, why aren't there more Muslim law firms? I mean, you have how many Muslims in New York? I would admit, how many Muslims in New York?
I don't know. I millions.
You gotta also Google that, brother. All right.
I gotta Google that too. I thought just a lot of
research here,
Yeah.
But with so many Muslims, I mean, I think in DC, for example, at least the DC metro area, there's some say about 1 million. So I would imagine in New York, you got to have more than that with a population. What's New York's population, by the way?
I'm not even sure. You ask me these technical questions. You got to
I'm
prepare me
sorry.
for these.
You're probably not
There's
a
millions of
Jeopardy.
people.
A Jeopardy. You're probably not
I
a
would do
Jeopardy fan.
terrible in Jeopardy. I would do terrible in Jeopardy.
I know.
Total fail.
I know. But with so many people in New York, it's a percentage of them, a significant percentage of being Muslim, I would imagine that there are a number of people who are coming before courts every day who are Muslim and who would probably prefer to have somebody who understands, their perspective. Perhaps many of them are immigrant. Some of them, I'm sure, are, converts like yourself, or people who have grown up second, third generation as Muslims here in the United States, and would appreciate having somebody who could understand their faith as well as their legal issue, representing them before a court or representing them in the context of negotiations or any other matter. What have you found it being a plus as a Muslim lawyer, particularly in New York? Have you seen a lot of clients who do seek you out just because you are Muslim?
We have a lot of clients. I mean, throughout my career, I've represented Muslims, and the good thing is, that if you go to a certain masjids and people get to know you in the masjid, people tend to ask, "What do you do?" You tell them you're a lawyer, and people come and they'll ask you questions. People will call you out of the blue and say, "Well, so and so, give me your name, brother, and can you answer this question, answer that question?" I try to make myself exceedingly available to people, Muslim and non-Muslim, because I have a pet peeve against the legal system generally. Is that it's so hard to understand for anyone. And I tell young lawyers and law students this, it's a language that no one understands unless they've gone to school for 3 years. And so people don't really know how to navigate the system. In any case, so because I'm Muslim, really, Islam calls us to do as much good as possible. So I really try to go out of my way to help as many people as possible and answer as many questions as possible. Now, everything doesn't have to have a price to it. Just people will call me and I'll have almost a quasi consultation on the phone and without charging anything. And I think lawyers should be more open to that, Muslim and non-Muslim. I think it's something the legal profession falls short on. Because I have a lot of problems with the legal profession. Generally speaking, the justice system, I shouldn't say the legal profession so much as the justice system. I'm amazed at how many Muslim lawyers there are now. I'm blown away by it. Someone just filed an appearance in a case today. A Muslim attorney, clearly by the name, and I just spoken to him 2 weeks ago. He was on the other side of a different case, and I said, "Here he is again," the same brother. So there's so many Muslim lawyers. As far as why. There are a lot of Muslim lawyers in private practice, and they may have solo firms. I know a number of very good ones, excellent Muslim attorneys. There are Muslim attorneys who are partners in firms in Manhattan. I've met some recently. I've never been one to really to socialize with attorneys generally, but recently I have had some occasion to, and I've met Muslim lawyers in all sorts of different professions. Why there aren't many quote unquote Muslim-owned firms outside of solo firms? There are a couple that I know of. It's a marriage, and it's not necessarily easy to find people that you trust and that you want to go into business with, Muslim or non-Muslim. And again, there are a lot of Muslim lawyers from a perspective of what they used to be 20 years ago or 10 years ago even, but there aren't necessarily as many as there should be. And people who are Muslim do try to seek out, I think, attorneys who are Muslim. And I think this is just human nature. People try to seek out those who they're familiar with and comfortable with.
Let's touch on a case that you have recently done for Abe Legal as a way of exemplifying what you just said in terms of how you and I think this is the case for all Abe lawyers, go the extra mile for our clients. You were representing a non-Muslim who was involved with an interesting probate matter. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. She received something in the mail. It was basically a citation where someone was applying to be or seeking to be the administrator of her deceased uncle's estate. And this person who was seeking to be the administrator, she didn't know this person. Who was this person? Why are they trying to be why am I getting these legal papers? And people get very concerned when they get legal papers, no matter what it is, because they don't know what it is. All they see is it says court, it has my name on it. What is this? So she was referred to me, and then I had a virtual consultation with her. And as it turned out, her uncle, while he was living, obviously, he had a car accident, and he passed away after the accident, not as a result of the accident, but as a result, I believe it was COVID related. The accident was before COVID. And so the person who was in the accident with him, who he allegedly hit, who the deceased uncle had allegedly hit, was suing the uncle. And you can't sue people who are deceased, so you have to sue their estate. And when the uncle passed away, he didn't have sufficient resources for anyone to apply for an estate, to try to form an estate. So this plaintiff was seeking to establish the estate, naming himself as administrator so he could sue the estate. And really it was about the insurance money. And when I spoke to her, I kind of put her at ease and told her, look, this is not no one's trying to take money out of your pocket. You're not responsible for any debts your uncle might have. That the problem is that the person who had this accident with the uncle was he had to order to sue, he had to establish the estate because he couldn't get money out of the insurance. They couldn't reach a settlement apparently. And I did speak to the attorney for the attorney who was representing this plaintiff in this car accident. And that was the case. The only way I can get the insurance money is to sue the estate, and since there is no estate, I have to set one up. So that kind of put her at ease. And I like the idea of being able to put people's minds at ease, because again, the law is a very unique language and not many people understand, but people go into a court building, they're intimidated by it. People go into a law firm, they're like, well, these are lawyers. Wow. And we get that from interns all the time. They're kind of nervous when they come in because we're working with lawyers and they're professional, and this is a whole different environment. I think I try to put people at ease as much as possible. Lawyers we're just people. It's just a job. It's a good job, a lot of benefits, but it's just a job.
Well, and I think that it's really important for people to kind of understand exactly what you did, because not only did you put her at ease, but as I understand, you agreed to reach out to the other side and explain to them how they needed to correct a notice, if you will, relating to one of the beneficiaries. Is that correct?
Right. They were serving papers on the relatives of the deceased uncle, so she was the child of. It was her father who was the deceased person who they trying to set the state up was her uncle through her father, but they were also serving her other uncles because they were heirs to the estate, but they were dead. They had already died of COVID also. So I called the lawyer and said, well, you've got these people named on your petition. Other than the woman I spoke to, everyone else here is dead. And so you have to try to find those people's relatives and serve them. So, I just trying to give the lawyer a heads up. Your papers are defective, so fix them.
And again, you did that without even further charge to her. And this just goes to say, and again, you shouldn't expect this from every lawyer, right? Quite frankly. But right. The lawyers, particularly at Abe Legal, we are those who want to, get the job done. We are professionals. We are seasoned. You see this gray hair, for example, which is the case with many, if not most of our lawyers. We are people who are those that have gone through the trenches already and know how to get the job done and are a worthwhile investment. So again, if you need, a legal issue to be taken care of anywhere here in these United States, and you want it done in a professional way, You want it done with someone who you can trust, who is going to go out for you, and you have some money, then come in contact with us. Don't call us if you're looking for free legal services. I got to tell people that because, we get a lot of calls, not almost every day. Get calls from people who are looking for free legal services. And that's, quite frankly, I lament over that because, as you say, it's my nature to want to help people, the way we help people, though, is by making sure that we do a bang-up job for them. And hopefully the word will get out about Abe Legal. We will become billionaires, and then we can maybe create a program specifically for those who can't afford to pay for legal services. Because, quite frankly, I look at this, and maybe, I want to get your perspective. Why is it that a doctor can be paid to provide medical services to people who don't have money to pay for his or her medical services through a insurance program, for example, which is in many cases funded by the government, and they're paid the fair rate, the same rate that they would be paid if they were dealing with a private insurance. They're paid for a patient who's, let's say, coming to them through a public insurance plan. But lawyers, there's no such program for most lawyers. There's the, let's say, legal aid and also the court-appointed attorneys. And in many cases, as you said, the court-appointed attorneys are paid, scraps. Right. I think that in Prince George's County, for example, they pay the court-appointed attorneys somewhere like $65 or $75 an hour. And, a normal attorney in Prince George's County is going to probably charge you like $250 to $500 an hour. So it's like peanuts. What do you think is the reason behind that? And what do you think we need to do to kind of create some parity between lawyers and doctors in that regard?
Well, I don't know if that'll ever happen. Because most people at some point in their life are going to need a lawyer. Most at some point, even if it's just buying a house, you need an attorney, but everybody needs a doctor, and it's seen as a more pressing need. I think the legal system, it's so expensive to hire a lawyer now, and the idea of having some kind of lawyer insurance is a great idea, but I don't think the general public would buy into it because why? Am I going to need a lawyer? Maybe not, but I know I'm going to need a doctor. I know as I get older, my health is going to go down. So I think there's that very important difference in perspective. I personally think that rather than creating a system that, this is going to be strange here, I'm a lawyer, rather than creating a system that kind of puts more money into lawyers' hands to represent clients, you have a system that makes the legal system more understandable, so not everyone needs a lawyer all the time. That's my opinion. I think the legal system is overly complicated. I think, unfortunately, the clerks who work in the court are put in a position where they can't give legal advice. They can't, and as far as legal advice is concerned, they can't answer basic questions. So I've been in courts and listened to the clerk speak to the average person on the street who's coming to ask a question about some legal papers they've received, and they get no help, almost no help. And now courts are setting up pro bono offices where there are lawyers who can at least answer basic questions for people, and I think that's a positive. But I think more needs to be done to make the system more understandable and comprehensible.
Well, and I think that goes back to my point. We were told again problem of the inability to find lawyers to represent clients in court-appointed cases from the director or the deputy for the state's public defender service. She had contacted us to find out if we could, provide any lawyers to her. And I was like, well, sure, you'll provide lawyers, but there's no way that any of our lawyers are going to want to take a case on $65 an hour. And this is to do exactly as you said, to provide pro bono services, free services to people who need it. And there's a bunch of them, and it definitely is apparent to me that the money that is being invested right now in both legal aid as well as pro bono legal clinics in the courts, as well as in the public defender services, is woefully inadequate. And
well, because
I
the people who need the services aren't that important to the society. The people who need those services are the working class and the poor. And you hear a lot of politicians talk about the middle. First of all, middle class is hard enough for them to pay for lawyers too, because middle class folks nowadays are not making that much money compared to the fees that lawyers charge, which we have to charge. I'm a lawyer. I know why it's so expensive. But we hear a lot of talk about the middle class. We don't hear any politicians talk about the poor and the people who are working, the working poor. There's more of them than anyone else. So the group of people who really can't afford the services are the people who the society cares about the least. So don't expect the society to step up and to spend money on these people who they don't spend money on their health care.
Very good point. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. As we wrap up, let me ask you this. Then in terms of, kind of projection, what are the biggest legal issues that you think you would advise your clients, particularly in New York, to prepare for? You said that everybody may not need a lawyer, but I would think that particularly if you have, if you're somebody like ourselves who are working, or professionals, let's just say working professionals, and you have some assets, a house, you have some children, you need a lawyer to at least draft or help you to put together an estate plan. And quite frankly, would you not agree that the best estate plan is a trust that would operate immediately upon your death, as opposed to having to go into court, as you were just talking about, in terms of a probate process, which could take months if it's a simple, or years if it's a more complicated estate matter? What would you suggest people do as a result of getting their house in order, if you will, by investing a little bit of their money in creating a trust?
Yeah, I think estate planning is incredibly important, especially for those who, again, a lot of the working class folks, they do own a home as the biggest asset. The one thing amazing about the American legal system is it really is designed to protect assets. A trust is a great way to protect assets. I remember representing a client at a deposition. He's a millionaire, multimillionaire. And he would ask at the deposition, does he own a house? Does he own a car? He said, no, I don't own any of these things. Well, how do you not own any of these things? Well, his house is in a trust. The house he lives in isn't owned by him, it's owned by the trust. His car is in a trust. Everything he owns is in a trust or in a corporation. He doesn't own anything. So yeah, trust is a wonderful estate planning tool. I do a lot of estate litigation. So I see what happens when people pass away and the family is fighting over whether this was actually his will. Where is his will? He didn't have a will. I want this. I want that. Make it easier on your relatives. We all should have some kind of an estate plan on what's going to happen with our assets when we pass away. And a trust is a great way to avoid, you lay out in a trust what happens with your asset. You own it. You manage the asset. The trust owns it. In New York, the trustee actually owns it through the trust, and the trust can be for your own benefit. And the trust is a great tool. Among many tools, this is where having a good estate plan comes in, and spending the money to sit down with an estate planning attorney and work out a plan for your assets, both while you're here and what should happen to them after you're no longer here, because none of us are here forever.
That's a fact. That's a guarantee.
Right.
Absolute guarantee that we are all going to pass away from here. And I'm so glad that you put that in perspective in terms of how beneficial it is for people to get their house in order and spend a little money on getting a estate plan set up. And we at Abe Legal have lawyers like you who can do that. And again, you see the contact information for Abe Legal down at the bottom. And so go ahead, take advantage of that information. And we'll put up our phone number in a minute here. But also, can you explain, as particularly a law firm owner, what do you think the impact of technology, particularly artificial intelligence, is going to have on the practice of law as we, look at the outlook for the next 10 years?
I'm always amazed by technology. The good thing is, Mohammed Salim, one of my partners, is relatively young. He's 20 years younger than me, and he kind of is the managing partner, and he has the firm involved in all the social media aspect, and I'm not on social media at all. I don't even have a LinkedIn account. So he is, and we actually have someone who works for us, a social media person who actually is working in that field, and now this thing with artificial intelligence and chat, whatever it is, chat CP or whatever it is, it's all ahead of me. I'll tell you honestly. When I went to law school, I remember Lexus was just starting, and we didn't, it was $2.50 a minute or something, and I was never trained on it in law school. So I'm not sure. I do know that the social media, you have to be on social media. Our law firm is on social media to promote yourself, because this is where the people are. The people are in social media. And as far as the technology, it's just racing. It's racing. And we're racing to keep up. I was communicating in a chat group with a WhatsApp group with attorneys. They were talking about, chat, this AI chat thing, writing, preparing motions and doing legal research for you. I'm not, where it's going, it's way ahead of the legal rules to control it. You've got these artificial intelligence that can write your motions and write this and do that. And it's Allah knows best where it's all going. I don't know where it's going, but it's all ahead of me. I'll be honest with you.
Well, it is exactly technology which facilitates and has facilitated the creation of Abe Legal, which is a platform to make the scheduling of seasoned lawyers as easy as getting a car sharing, service, or an Uber, if you will, to come and pick you up. That's what we're all about. And we're also about using technology to make the practice of law more fun, if you will, more profitable, and really to help seasoned lawyers like yourself do more of what you're doing right now. And that is, providing advice to people, which is what someone like you, with the knowledge base that you have, you are a gem, quite frankly. And if we can, eliminate some of the administrative tasks that are necessarily always required, particularly for small law firm practitioners, they can really give more to the public, and the public needs more, as we talked earlier about. So I really appreciate you spending some of your invaluable time with us tonight, and with the public as you do. And again, for people who are looking to schedule an appointment with Attorney Davis, you can go to our customer support line at 202-517-6982. And again, even though this is a 202 number based in Washington, D.C., we are booking attorneys all over the country. And if you need an attorney to maybe come on your podcast or television show, also call us at 202-517-6982. Attorney Davis, as you close, can you speak a little bit on the challenges that our nation faces with violence? I know you have practiced some criminal law, as I understand. Right. How tragic is it to see young people, particularly before the courts, especially young people who may have Muslim names? And what do you think we need to be doing to engage them in a way so they can maybe get the mentoring that they need, and steer away from violence and maybe towards technology careers, for example. What do you think needs to be done there as a nation?
Well, that's a huge question, and most people wouldn't. If you had more time, I could sit down and tell you my whole plan for trying to fix it. I'll be honest. As a criminal attorney, it always broke my heart to see anyone before the criminal justice system, and it was very often, poor minorities before the criminal justice system, and poor people generally speaking. And there's a reason for that, and I think the violence that exists in America is so deeply rooted. It's a country, unfortunately, that was founded upon violence against the natives who were here before the Europeans came, violence against the workers who were imported forcibly from Africa to work the lands that were stolen from the natives. And so you unfortunately, I think that the nation has great ideals. The Constitution. One of the reasons I became a lawyer, what interested me in law was in high school, in ninth grade. I went to Tilden High School, and they had a program there called Law, Politics, Community Affairs. And in my ninth grade, I learned about the Constitution. And it intrigued me so much. This document intrigued me. And unfortunately, the ideals in that document aren't measured up to. And the society itself it's almost as if violence is baked into it. And there isn't, to me, enough concern with really changing these circumstances of the violence we see. There are platitudes, and we hear a lot of platitudes, but we don't ever see any real action. And I'm talking about way beyond gun control and getting rid of assault weapons. There's a deep problem in America. There's a deep problem here. And it's not a problem that anyone is really talking about. And it goes way beyond just getting rid of guns. There's so much violence now. Every single day we hear about a mass shooting. And there's a lot to this. There's a lot to how the country is formed. There's a lot to what this country even does today and how it spends its money. They're talking now about the debt ceiling and there's this idea that we have to reduce the spending, and there's always domestic spending on the people. We got to spend less on the people, on certain people, but we have billions to send to other countries to kill people in other countries, but we don't have any money to protect the lives of the people who live in this country. And not that people in this country are any more special, better than anyone else, but the idea that we can't do anything for the people who live here, but we have money to kill other people, it's crazy to me. So I think there's you reap what you sow very often, and I don't say that flippantly. I say it with pain in the heart that I see what's happening in this society and pain. I live here. I'm American. I don't want to see this going on in my country. I don't want to see it. It breaks my heart. But I don't see the people who need to be in charge, who could address this, are not in charge. And the people who are called to, who end up in charge, don't really care. Not really. And actions speak louder than words.
I guess when we have the indictment of Congressman Santos, this is an example right there in New York, right? It's an example of what you're talking about. But you're right, man. I'm somebody who was a former congressional aide, and a former aide to a member of a so-called state legislature here in Washington, D.C. And I understand firsthand, what you're talking about, man. And it's sad to see, how much we spend as a nation in terms of the government and governments, and what more or better in ways our money could be spent. For example, the amount of money we spend on jailing somebody versus educating them and preventing them from going to jail, for example. Right. So, again, I really value your comments. It's been really terrific to talk with you. And you're that type of person. For the people in the audience who can see, Tarik Davis is the type of person who you really can just spend hours upon hours, talking to. He has both that smoothness of voice as well as the depth of his knowledge that will just, enthrall you, and you can, really enjoy being in his, space, if you will, and
I appreciate you saying
up
that.
That knowledge. And so, if you have a case and you need somebody who's knowledgeable, like Attorney Davis, then contact Abe by our phone number, 202-517-6982, or visit us at abe.legal. We have people who are working for you both day and night to make sure that you are getting the type of help that you need. We are fixers, and that's what we do very well. So whatever type of legal case you have, we're people who can take care of you wherever your case is in these United States, and in fact, sometimes around the world as well. So, Attorney Davis, any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, listen, I appreciate the time. It was wonderful talking to you. I'd like to follow up on some of the things we talked about off the air. Listen, it was wonderful, and I thank you for your kind words. Look, any good that me and or my law firm can do, we're looking to do it. So I appreciate the opportunity that your organization is giving us to do a little bit of good for a few people. So I appreciate that.
And we look forward to helping more people and to do a lot of good. So again, Attorney Davis, thanks so much. We look forward to continuing to make your outstanding services in your firm more widely known and more widely utilized by the New Yorkers and also people in the New York region. So again, this has been Attorney Talib Kareem with Attorney Tarik Davis, co-founder of one of the largest Muslim law firms in the state of New York. If you do need any legal services, don't hesitate to contact us day or night at 202-517-6982 or by visiting us online at abe.legal. We look forward to coming back to you with our next Abe Legal podcast with another one of our seasoned world-class lawyers. Without any further ado, let me just say good evening, good morning, or good afternoon to you wherever you are watching. Take care. And assalamu alaikum to all those who know the answer to that phrase.